In this video, we're going to talk about calories in, calories out. Hopefully, I'll explain kind of how all the myths behind the calories in, calories out, move more, eat less. And I mean, there's some truth to it, but there's also a lot of falsehood to it. Because a calorie is a calorie, but it's also not, because it depends on how your body responds to that food source. So I don't care what diet you're on. You can be on a purely McDonald's diet or all sugar candy diet. If you're eating less calories or less energy than your body needs, you're going to lose weight. But what kind of weight are you losing? Or you can overeat as well. I don't care if you're on the ketogenic diet or carnivore, eating nothing but meat. You can still overeat and gain weight. But on a diet where you're in ketosis, where you're fat adapted, it's a lot harder to gain the weight. And there's reasons for that. So how does your body respond to that? So the key is not necessarily calories in, calories out. You always have to be in a deficit if you're going to lose fat, but how do you get into that deficit? That's what makes the difference, how your body responds to the foods that you eat. So your body does respond differently to carbohydrates than it does fat or protein. And that's what we're going to talk about here quickly. So what are the biggest things that people have a hard time with when it comes to losing weight? Well, the key is they really don't want to lose weight, they want to lose fat. But that's not what happens in those calorie-restricted diets. So one of the biggest things that people want to learn to control and have the biggest issue with is hunger. Everybody is going to have that. And it's not always about how disciplined you are either. And we cover this in another video about sugar addiction. If you've been told you're lazy, just don't have any willpower, no discipline, that's not 100% true. I had to change my attitude toward that too, once I actually saw the research. But you've got to be able to control hunger. Now, 80% of the people who start a diet don't finish it. Why? Because they're hungry, they feel deprived, they feel like they're starving to death, they have brain fog, they have no energy. It just sucks. I mean, it's horrible when you have that. So they come up with medications that kind of help. There's pills that help with appetite suppressant. Those new shots, they help greatly with appetite suppressant. So it makes it easier, kind of removes one of those pain points. Well, when you use all those medications, there's a price that you're going to pay doing it that way. But they do help with controlling the hunger. But there's a natural way that you can control the hunger, that your body does that on its own. And I'm going to explain the difference. When you eat carbohydrates, and we know this without a doubt, sugar, whether it's pasta, or breads, or candy, or just the sugar itself, fruit, those carbohydrates turn into glucose, which is basically just sugar. And we know that sugar addiction is real. And this is where I had to change my attitude towards it. I always kind of thought, well, if it is to be, it's up to me. Well, that's not all true. And I'm not making excuses for anybody, but sugar affects your brain in many, many different ways, where there are withdrawals to it. We just don't think of it as being withdrawals, because we look at someone who is, on drugs, and they have the shakes and the sweats and that kind of stuff is pretty severe and violent withdrawal symptoms. Well, sugar addiction is the same. As a matter of fact, it's actually more addictive than drugs. And we have this in research in rodents and humans. In rodents, they took, and we cover all this in the video, but I'm going to give just a real brief stroke. When they took sugar water and cocaine water, even after they increased the cocaine dosages many times, I don't remember the exact number, but quite a bit, 94% of the time the mice chose the sugar water over the cocaine. In human studies, they did brain scans. The sugar and cocaine had the same dopamine response in the brain. And they now believe that 70% of the American population is sugar addicted. Now, what are some of the symptoms of sugar addiction? They're very mild, and we think of them because they're so commonplace, it's not really a withdrawal. But some of the symptoms are moodiness, brain fog, the hunger pains, it's almost like you felt like a blood sugar drop, the cravings. Those are all withdrawal symptoms. And they're just not as great or as violent as they are with other drugs when they withdraw from, but they're just as real. So just think about it this way, because I've experienced this firsthand. I'll start to get a little tired, a little hungry, get that little hunger pain in my stomach, and even get a little bit moody, then I'll go eat a piece of candy, Reese's peanut butter cup or whatever. Man, I feel great. In about 10 minutes, I start feeling good. And I feel good for about half hour, 45 minutes. Then I start getting, like just even in my muscles, like it's a blood sugar drop. I'm getting a little bit hungry. I'm losing no energy. I'm getting a little bit of brain fog. Then I go eat another one. I feel great for a little bit. Those symptoms are withdrawal symptoms. And even when you switch to a diet that's low carb, you're going to go through a withdrawal. And typically, what they call it, like if you're on keto, they'll call it the keto flu, because you feel kind of crappy for about 2 to 5 days, depending on the patient or person. Yeah, and again, what are some of the symptoms when they withdraw? Brain fog, no energy, cravings, hunger, the energy levels. I mean, it's just all over the place. So, but once they break through that, and they become fat adapted, burning fat for fuel instead of glucose, all that goes away. But that's how addicted we are to sugar. And sugar isn't everything. Unless it's a whole food, except for fruits, it's in everything. So that's why, what does sugar do? We know that sugar lowers the ghrelin response, or hormonal response in the gut, which means the ghrelin is a hunger hormone. Well, it lowers the ghrelin hormone, which means it makes you more hungry. That's why you can eat a whole bag of Cheetos or 3 rolls of sushi and you're hungry still. You're not full. But you can eat a 12-ounce steak or a 10-ounce steak and you're stuffed. That's the difference how your body responds to it. Also, it lowers the satiety response in centers in the brain, so it makes you more hungry. So the carbohydrates, the sugar, actually make you more hungry, and which means you want to go eat more. And that's why it's such a struggle when anyone does any type of calorie restriction, and if they don't get rid of the sugar, they're going to struggle with it. And that's why most people fail. It's not because they don't have the willpower or the drive or they're just lazy. It's because they're fighting those withdrawal symptoms, and they can be pretty severe, and they don't go away immediately. Like I said, when you break that habit, it takes about 3 or 4 days on average, anywhere from 2 to 5 days. So that's a big problem with the typical diets, because you're fighting all those issues along with all the other negatives to calorie restriction that we're going to talk about. So the first thing you got to do is be able to control hunger. And we just talked about what sugar and glucose does. It does the opposite. It actually raises a hunger hormone. It makes you more hungry. Well, the way you can control it without having to take shots or pills is with the nutrition that you're taking in. When you are keto adapted or ketogenic, or you're fat adapted, burning fat for fuel, it actually lowers the ghrelin hormone, which makes you less hungry. It raises the satiety centers in the brain, so it makes you less hungry. It also even turns on the receptors in the stomach, which tells you that your body is stretching. Your stomach is stretching to tell your body that it's full. So it does the exact opposite of sugar. Sugar makes you more hungry. Being fat adapted makes you less hungry. And when you do get hungry, because you'll have some hunger. It's not like the kind of hunger where you're just completely drained, going to pass out, or feel completely weak. It's not that kind of hunger. You'll get a little bit hungry and then it goes away. But you don't have the blood sugar, drops. You have consistent energy throughout the day. The brain fog goes away. The clarity, the sleep, everything gets better when you're fat adapted. So that's a natural way to control appetite, is just by becoming fat adapted. So it lowers all the hormone responses. It lowers the insulin response. It lowers the ghrelin response, and it raises the satiety response in the brain. It does the complete opposite of sugar. So that's how you can do that through nutrition. So the first thing you got to learn to do is control hunger. And we prefer you control it without medications. The second thing you've got to be able to do, if you want to be able to lose weight and not have that rebound effect and lose it one time, is you've got to maintain your metabolic rate. Because your metabolic rate is going to determine how many calories you can take in a day, or how much energy you can take in a day, and either not gain weight or lose weight. And your metabolic rate is going to adapt to your nutrition. So if you start restricting calories, your metabolic rate is going to adapt to that calorie intake, that lower calorie intake, and it's going to begin to lower. When it begins to lower, which is quickly as 2 weeks, it drops quickly and recovers very slowly. In addition to that, when you do hit your goal weight at some point in the future and you start eating for that new goal weight, and your energy level based on what it should be, your metabolic rate is going to recover extremely slow. So it drops quick, but recovers very slow. Also, 40% of that weight loss that you experience restricting calories comes from lean muscle tissue, which is the largest portion of your metabolic rate. So you're inhibiting that recovery because you've lost a ton of muscle mass as well, lean tissue mass. So that's why when people, whether they're counting points or the meals, it doesn't matter what they're doing, when they've restricted calories to lose weight, and they go back to eating calories based on their new body weight, even though it's lower than when they started, they gain all the weight back and some. That's called a rebound effect. And usually they almost always gain it all back and a little bit more. Well, the reason for that is because they've lowered the metabolic rate and they've also lost lean muscle mass, which makes it harder to recover. Look at the Biggest Loser study. There's never been there's never been a follow-up. And look at the Women's Initiative, and they're just doing on PubMed. There's research, just look up metabolic rate, calorie restriction. Tons of research. Well, the key is you don't want to lower your metabolic rate. You want to maintain it or increase it. Now, how can you do that? How can you get to maintain your metabolic rate or increase it and still lose weight? Well, the way you can do that, well, there's several different ways, but the primary way is become fat adapted. Through research, when you become fat adapted, you're burning fat for fuel because it takes more energy to turn fat into fuel than it does glucose through thermogenesis. Your metabolic rate increases 15 to 20%. Now, you're eating the same amount of calories, but your metabolic rate has now increased 15 to 20%. Let me give you an example of that. Let's say in my case, I need about 2,700 calories a day, but we're going to say 2,500 just to keep it easy. So if I'm eating 2,500 calories a day and I'm fat adapted, so modified keto, ketogenic diet. Well, if my metabolic rate increases 20%, well, now my metabolic rate is 3,000 calories. So it's burning 3,000 calories a day, but I'm only taking in 2,500, which is what I was taking in before. Well, what happens? I'm in a deficit and I'm still eating the same amount of food. So now I'm starting to lose fat. Since I'm fat adapted, it's accessing my fat stores in my body and melting those off. That's how you can actually increase your metabolic rate, or at least maintain it and lose fat. So when you get to your goal weight, whatever that goal weight is, and you start eating for that new goal weight, you're not going to have that rebound effect because you didn't lower your metabolism. And since I was eating the same amount of calories, I didn't lose any lean muscle tissue either. All I was losing was fat through thermogenesis. That's how you do it. That's how you can maintain your metabolic rate or even increase it and lose fat, but maintain your lean muscle tissue as well, and you're burning fat. And you're not going to have that rebound effect. It's all in the science. It's all in the research. You do it with the nutrition. So you can control the hunger, and you can maintain your metabolic rate and still lose weight, lose fat at the same time. Now, in addition, you need to maintain lean muscle mass. Well, when you're restricting calories and you're glucose dominant, you're going to lose lean muscle. 40% of your weight loss is going to come from lean muscle tissue. So, which is going to make your metabolic rate recovery a lot harder. And you're stepping back. Every time you go through that diet, you're stepping backwards because you're losing muscle mass. Well, with a ketogenic type diet or a low carb or modified type diet, you're not losing that lean muscle tissue. But what we're going to suggest if you want to be able to increase it is even if you're on a calorie-restricted diet, you're doing this old school, normal diet, you're just restricting calories, you're not fat adapted, you have got to start doing weight resistance training, and you've got to up your protein. Your protein is the number one nutrient or macro that you got to watch. Is you've got to get it up there. And because the muscle mass, lean muscle tissue, is such a large portion of the metabolic rate, losing any of that, you just can't afford it. So calorie restriction is going to cause you to lose lean muscle mass. The lack of use, if you're not working out with the weight resistance training, you're going to lose lean muscle tissue. Again, as you get older, sarcopenia kind of sets in. It's just lack of use. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Well, as you get older, we're going to talk about this, the protein, you need more protein. The people say, well, I'm older, I don't need as much protein, I'm not growing. No, you need more protein to maintain your lean muscle mass. Well, it's the same thing I don't care what age you are, you've got to up your protein. So you can't restrict calories, you've got to do weight resistance training, and you've got to up your protein. And this is what we suggest if you want to be able to maintain lean muscle mass. Even if you're on fat adapt because we want to grow it, or if you're calorie restrictive, and you're going to go down that path, this is how you can help maintain it. One, you need 1 gram of protein per goal body weight every day. For a male, you need to eat at least 50 grams of protein per meal, per setting, at a time, minimum at a time. For females, it's a minimum 35 grams of protein at a time. If you do weight resistance training that day, you can eat a little bit less, but if you're definitely not doing any weight resistance training, 50 for a male, 35 for a female. That's going to help maintain that lean muscle mass along with weight resistance training. So if you're in those shots or you're doing calorie restricted, you've got to do those or you're going to lose a lot of muscle mass and it's going to take a long time to recover and you're definitely going to have that rebound effect. So another thing that will cause you to lose lean muscle mass is high intensity training. Because high intensity training cardio does not burn fat, it burns glucose. And we all know people who have gone, and I'm not saying there's a place for that. And cardiovascular endurance is awesome. You need high intensity training for that, especially if you're some kind of athlete or you're in a job that requires it. But for fat loss, it's the worst thing you can do. And we all know people who've done hundreds of high intensity training sessions and nothing's really changed. And people have done marathons who are skinny fat. Well, there's a reason, because they're burning glucose for fuel. If there's not enough of it in their system, it will eventually start pulling it from the muscle, and they will lose their muscle from that. But it stores fat because it's not burning fat. Now, if you want to burn fat and do cardio, steady state cardio, aerobic cardio, that means you're just walking at a pace or whatever it is, your bike, whatever it is, at a pace that keeps your heart rate around 120 or so, or you can carry on a conversation. If you can't carry on a conversation, you need to slow it down. But just steady state cardio is the way to do it if you're going to do it, to maintain lean muscle mass but burn fat. But high intensity will burn, you will lose muscle long term with it. So you've got to maintain a lean muscle mass because that's a large portion of your metabolic rate. It's also a large portion of your being able to function as you get older. Then the final thing we need to talk about is burning fat for fuel. That's how you lose the fat, is you got to be able to burn it for fuel. Now, you can do that by heavy calorie restriction, just like we said before. But you get all the negative side effects of that, which is lowering your metabolic rate, losing lean muscle mass. You're going to have that rebound effect when you get off of it. So how can you burn the fat for fuel without all the negative side effects? Well, one is use a ketogenic diet, so you're burning fat for fuel. That's your primary fuel source. You're not taking in a lot of carbs, so it doesn't convert, and it's always burning fat for fuel. Secondly, you can actually go into a calorie deficit when you're in a ketogenic diet. But the way we do it is you don't do it for an extended period of time. So it doesn't give you a chance to your metabolic rate to adapt to it. So we will do what's called calorie shifting or calorie cycling. Typically anywhere from 1 day up to 5 days of where you will restrict calories more than normal. And then you go back to maintenance levels for 2-3 days. So say 5 days of calorie restriction and then 3 days of maintenance. And that's enough to give your body extra little fat burning, but not long enough to affect your metabolic rate. Then we may even increase your maintenance calories just a little bit on those days off. So everybody's a little bit different. That's how you can do it. So low carb, become fat adapted, do calorie shifting if you're going to do a calorie deficit, and then exercise that targets fat loss. Now, how do you do that? Weight resistance training and steady state cardio, no high intensity training. So if you're wanting to lose fat once and for all, do it right. You don't want to have the rebound effect. You don't want to do all that work only to have to do it again and again and again every few months or once a year. That's the way to do it. It's through a ketogenic type diet, a low carb diet that's going to help you control hunger. It's going to help you maintain metabolic rate. It's going to help you maintain your lean muscle mass. And it's going to burn fat for fuel and protect you from all the negative side effects of that. So if you have any questions, let us know. But this is the true story about calories in, calories out. Calories do play a part, but it's more about how your body responds to it and how it affects the metabolic rate. So if you have any questions, let us know.